So Birkir, we're back on the mics after a long season.
A beautiful season.
Beautiful season, but also historical for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, for most people, for most rivers, a poor run of fish, very low water, pink salmon, and in August we got the terrible news of the big
Escaped of
what
farmed
can we
fish.
call it? Escape, from a fish farm in the West Fjords.
We'll just call it a disaster.
It's a disaster, and hopefully, well, I didn't. We filmed this episode, which is an interview with Tarquin Millington-Drake. He's the managing director of Frontiers International. We filmed it in May. He was here fishing with some of his clients on the Ion Beat, and we touch up on conservation, fish farms and stuff in this. I didn't think it would have this strong of a connection to what we're dealing with after this summer.
No, his words on it just makes so much more sense to listening to it again.
They echo.
It echoes. It hits harder than ever.
We were just sort of, before we taped this intro, sort of flipping through the episode, remembering what we talked about, and we were just sitting here in silence when Tarquin was talking about the way it was in Scotland when he was a young man and they were starting fish farming then. They didn't fight hard enough, and yeah, it really...
Yeah, you can see it today, how it's there and how it's beginning here.
Yeah. But we were lucky enough to get an interview with Tarquin, which I met last year when I was working on the Selá, and he was fishing. He's been fishing on the Selá since '92, so I was incredibly fortunate to have him show me the ropes on my first season as a guide on the Selá.
Yeah, you got the fast track there.
I got the fast track there, I can say that for sure.
And we're benefiting from that.
We're
the rest of the
benefiting
clients.
now, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But he first came to Iceland in '89, and he's probably the single person responsible for bringing the most high-end clients to Iceland in that time frame.
Yeah.
Maybe Árni Baldursson in his prime, of course, he was quite big, but I thought this would be an interesting interview to do because we are often very much locked in our bubble here in Iceland, and especially for people that don't work in the industry, not guides or outfitters and stuff, they don't have any connection to these foreign clients, which we always hear about. So I think Tarquin gave us both a wonderful perspective of what it is people come to Iceland to experience, and also maybe from his professional perspective as someone who brings people all over the world fishing, what it is we could do better and what we need to look out for. So we touch on a lot of things: salmon fishing going forward, global warming, conservation, grouse, and of course
the famous Alta.
The famous Alta.
Oh yeah.
It's very interesting to hear sort of first-hand accounts from someone as experienced on the Alta as Tarquin is.
Well, when he describes the first fish going for a fly as a tuna.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, we just know more and more that we're just fishing for grills in Iceland.
I mean, you see these fish, 40, 50, 60 pounds, and you just, is it the same species? But it is for sure, and it's wonderful that they exist, and now it's up to us to make sure they continue to exist.
And we'd like to thank our sponsor for helping us out doing these episodes, and that's of course the fishing store in Iceland, Veiðiflugur.
Yeah, for all your fishing needs in Iceland, you should go to Veiðiflugur in Langholtsvör and talk to Friðjón and Andri and Gretar and the boys. And
yeah, there's always a warm cup of coffee there and very good knowledge about Iceland fishing. So go ahead and check that spot out if you're in Iceland.
Well, Tarquin, take it away. Tarquin, welcome to Hilurinn, and very good to see you again.
Thank you, very good to see you.
We had a good week together fishing on the Selá.
We did. We had a great time, actually.
Yeah,
showing you the river.
Yes, I was guiding there for the first time, and to get you to show me around, it was absolutely fantastic.
And did you have success afterwards?
Yes, it was very good, and even had success in some of your weirder pools, which you spoke of.
Good.
I'm just gonna run down there and have a quick 2 casts.
Good.
So yeah, it was very interesting, and for me, very sort of a learning curve as well, watching an experienced angler such as yourself do its thing.
Well, we started on Sella in 1992. I first fished Sella. And there were 4 of us. We didn't have any guides. We drove from Akureyri in those Russian cars. I can't remember what the make of them is. We barely made it. It was a dirt road all the way from Akureyri. And we lived in that little lodge, which was wonderful. And I think we did 22 years or something in the little lodge. Mm-hmm. And all the things that were wrong with it in 1992 remained exactly as they were for the entire 22 years. Like my bed was never repaired and on an angle for 22 years. The shower door that fell off every time you had a shower continued to fall off for 22 years. But we grew to absolutely love the place. And there were 3 of us who fished it every year, unguided. And we would have a different guest every year who would be guided. And I think we had some of the best years. I mean, it was extraordinary. The first year, I remember we caught 39 fish, and the guest brought 13 rods with him. And every time I drove past, he was changing rods. So he caught 1 fish for the 4 days that we did in those years. And we caught all the rest because he was never fishing. He was always fiddling with his fishing tackle. So anyhow,
they were good days. When you talk to people that fished Sella in the old days, it's not that far away, before they built the new fantastic lodge, both in Leifstaðir and that lower lodge, everyone has, the beds were crooked, but it was a very sort of a
very fond memories. We had some great chefs over the years, some who are now guiding there. Mm-hmm. Ole. And we were just talking about I did a podcast the other day, and they asked me, what if my last days in the field would be, and I included Sella in that because it is such a fantastic place. But what's really cool about Sella is, I can't remember how I expressed it, but I basically said that, Sella's got lots of fresh fish and lots of amazing water, etc. So the potential for success is enormous. But on Sella, the potential for humiliation and failure, mm-hmm. despite all the amazing water and the huge fish and all the fish, etc., is enormous. I mean, that river can really bite you and defeat you, mm-hmm. no matter how many fish there are. And that's what's cool about it, is it's very, very challenging.
How was it operated in these days with the 2 lodges? Were you, for those years when you were staying in the lower lodge, were you only fishing the lower part of the river? Or?
So yeah, we did 4 days fishing, and we fished the 4 lower beats, and the top pool was the pool below Leifstaðir pool.
Leifstaðir,
yeah. That was the pool. Yeah, the top pool was the one below that. Oh, yeah. So it included the epic pools like Stekkr and Red Rocks and the Bear and all of that. And we did 4 days, so we'd do each beat once in the morning and once in the evening, and it was fantastic. And we did that for 20-something years. And we were never guided, we were never even shown the river. So it was quite a learning curve. Mm-hmm. And what was fun is you'd come back after a session and particularly one friend, he and I would, we were very observant of what we've experienced. So we were able to come back and describe what we'd seen and what the water was doing and everything in incredible detail. And then so we basically taught each other the river through experience.
Mm-hmm. It's not often you get to, as a guide, to be with someone who has way more fishing experience in general, and especially way more experience from that particular river. Because when you learn a river guiding, I feel you learn it different than if you were fishing it yourself. I noticed with you, for example, you were fishing pools from the wrong side, and
Right.
and if you understand what I'm saying, sort of, yes, this fish is nice from here, but then we need to go to the other side to fish that little, because it turns away from like that, and you even, I could really, because someone like yourself who's fished all over the world for a river can just become another river.
Yeah.
But you were wondering about casting, how a mirror comes through a riffle to hit your fly into that mirror and have it fish through that mirror. It's, you reach a certain point in the sport where you're always the one, when you're fishing, that knows more, that it's hard to levitate.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very interesting to hear all your thoughts and sort of your deep perspective on the cellar.
I mean, the cellar it's extraordinary. I mean, I remember, I have so many memories. In the early days, we used to, as I said, we fished unguided, and if I was fishing a pool before we packed in for lunch, I would finish the pool, and then I would literally walk around the pool to understand its lies and its holes and everything, and you'd move fish out of the way. You obviously wouldn't do it, if there wasn't a break and time for the pool to rest, but you could learn a lot from that. But there's a pool called Lania, or that long soft pool. I think it's Lena's Brado, not Lania. Okay. And it often has a lot of white moths on it. Mm-hmm. And you used to see the salmon coming up and hitting the white moths. Really? And so I tied, what was essentially...
Were they just rising like trout?
Yeah, just knocking the moths. And I tied a sort of, it was basically a weird muddler, which was imitating the moth, what I thought was imitating the moth. And it's never worked in Lania, but then I tried it at a Fossborough at the Falls, and to this day, it is effective there, but you have to work out, and this is where cellar's so cool, you don't just go down, put it on, you have to work out, because some years, if you hitch it, and it skates right on the top with a really oily V, it's effective. Other years, you don't hitch it, and you have it plowing through the surface, and that's when it'll work. And then other years, you half hitch it, and it's in between. And that, in that pool, is the most effective. They react to that. So you have to work out how to hitch that fly.
Because it's a bit of a weird angle on the Foss. So
exactly.
You need something buoyant, like
exactly.
a muddler or something. That's very interesting.
So it's cool. It's cool. And time on a low, I think anyone who has spent time alone with a river will get to know it better than. Mm-hmm. And I always think, I've guided in Russia and I've guided in Iceland and stuff, but people, you talk about good fishermen and not so good fishermen, and it's not in the casting, but it's like building a database of experience. Mm-hmm. Salmon fishing is that really, and there are people who salmon fish that if you and someone else go down to a pool, one of them will come back and go, I caught a fish and it was by the rock and I was stripping and it came and it was this and it did that and blah 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 blah. The other guy will go, I don't know, it was just halfway down the pool. I don't really know.
Exactly.
And he's never going to be a great fisherman because he's not. None of it's going in his database. Mm-hmm. And again on cellar, many times when I've been looking after people, one of our group was getting old towards the end of our time, and so I agreed to share with him so he could carry on basically. And there would be times when he'd rise a fish and it would rise to a bad cast. that the wind had flipped it upstream or whatever, and then he'd make good casts or whatever. The fish wouldn't react, and then I'd write, okay, David, just cast the way you cast the first time it rose. So just cast weakly, let the wind blow it upstream, etc. Sure enough, the fish would come up. I'm sure you've seen that.
I mean, I've often described it as, a great trout fisherman and someone was very good at putting together logically where the fish is, what he's eating, and all that. But a salmon fisherman, it's sort of a dark art, so to speak. You see someone like Denny, who works on the cellar, and it doesn't always make sense to me what he's saying. Yeah. And like we were talking about the mirrors, and does it matter, does it not matter? Yeah. It works for him. When he picks up the yellow fly he's been casting, decides it needs a little black and pulls out a lighter and lights it on fire halfway, and boom. What makes him do that? I don't know. Yeah. But there is definitely something unlogical about a great salmon angler.
But a lot of it is down to observation. If you don't observe what you're doing in any fly fishing, you're never going to become good at it, really, I don't think.
There is fishing, and then there's just casting and hoping for the best.
Exactly. Yeah. So
you've been coming to Iceland for over 30 years, and I think very few people have brought as many anglers to Iceland as you have in that time. What brought you here originally? What sparked your interest?
I think I came to Iceland the first time, I think it was 1989, and I rented one of those Russian cars again, and I drove to the kiosk where a certain gentleman who's very famous in Iceland had just wormed the 4,000th salmon out of the kiosk. And whacked it on the head, and it was sitting on the bank, and that was the first Icelandic salmon I ever saw. And we fished the kiosk a little bit.
And that's in that famous record-breaking year for the kiosk?
Yeah, I think it was 89. Was it 89?
I think so.
It was either 89 or 90. I think it was 89. And I've been coming ever since, and, I think most people who come to Iceland agree that the reason why they come to Iceland is because of the clear water, the tiny flies, the visual nature of the fishing, the intimate nature in that you're so close to the fish so often, the people as well, the beauty of the place, etc. And that's certainly why I come to Iceland. And, in those days when we fished the cellar, all those years, we used to always try and come and fish the cellar, and we always used to try and fish a different river as well, just to get to know. So I've fished, 18, 20 rivers in Iceland as a result. And it's just the most fascinating, challenging, intimate, technical salmon fishing I've ever done, I think.
But at the same time, I must assume for someone like yourself who organizes trips and sells to clients, you can sell to a different clientele a 2-hour flight to Reykjavik and a paved road, everyone speaks English, short cast, than the client who wants to go into the tundra on a Soviet helicopter and stay in a tent. Be eaten by midges.
They're almost different animals. The guys who go to Russia are generally double-handed rod guys. They're serious waders. Whereas the Iceland people are either older or more technically minded. Whereas the guys going to Russia, like to swing a fly with a big line and all the rest of it. So they're almost different people, really. But people are incredibly loyal to Iceland because of the interesting fishing. I mean, it is very intimate and interesting fishing.
I think I asked Árni Baldursson a very similar question about Iceland and why people come again and again. And he didn't quite have the answer, but he said it was interesting if you sell someone a trip to the Seychelles, or it's more of a bucket list thing. They will go and they've done Seychelles, but they will always do their week in Iceland. Why do you?
I think that's right. I mean, I think there's a danger that's going to change. But I think that's a fair comment. And people are very loyal to Iceland. Once they've, as you know, there are very narrow prime times for each river. But once they find their niche and find the river that they're comfortable with, they give it up pretty reluctantly because they love it.
And in those, like 30 years ago when you started coming here, it was, you used to have these British, Swiss, even American groups sort of in the end there. And they would just find the river, they would like it, and they would stay. You would have people that have just fished Grímsá for 30 years. They haven't seen another river.
Yeah.
That's changed a little bit as well. Maybe that's because the fishing has gone down and they're chasing numbers. I don't know. Or is it just a generational thing?
I think it's a bit of that. I think if you track the sort of success rate of Icelandic seasons, there's more difficult seasons in the last decade than there were in the previous decade, and probably more difficult seasons in that decade than the previous decade. Drought years are coming more regularly. Lean years are coming more regularly in terms of numbers of fish.
Very lean.
And some very lean, yeah. And I think that the whole tempo of the fishing industry in Iceland has gone up several notches. The prices are higher, people are racing around. There aren't regular guides on the rivers, they're moving around more. By definition, if you raise the price for anything, but we're talking about fishing, the expectation goes up, and therefore the potential for disappointment goes up. There's nothing anybody can do about a drought. Whether there's anything people can do about less fish, we can discuss that, but I've worked for Frontiers for 30 years, and I was in the industry for a few more years before that. And the sad fact is, from a fishing point of view, I can't think of a destination that has got better. They've all got worse through fishing pressure, global warming, whatever. They've all got, and it's a problem that troubles me because it's all getting more expensive, and therefore less people have the potential to do it and enjoy it. And if less people enjoy it, less people care about it, and therefore when it's in trouble, there's less people who will come to its rescue financially or with the gift of time or campaigning or whatever.
That's a very true point. I feel for your normal Icelander, salmon fishing is very much out of reach. It's for corporations and rich foreigners, so that's sort of the stereotypical view of it. And even I think for the owners of the rivers themselves, the landowners, whether it be farmers or other owners, the rich foreigner has been a constant. They've always gotten more money. Will we reach a point soon where the rich foreigners, within sort of goosebumps, I don't know how to say it, but will there be a turning point where people will say enough is enough, and Iceland will start seeing even a decrease in price?
I think we're almost at that turning point. And I mean, it's tricky, but I think the difference between a a sort of major turning point and a hard turning point and a soft turning point is going to be the currency. Mm-hmm. If the prices will go up next year, we all know that it's built into the leases that the price has to go up with Icelandic inflation, and there's inflation in Iceland like there is anywhere else. So the food's going to go up, the salaries are going to. So the price is going to go up, mm-hmm. And if the currency goes against the foreigners as well, then it's really going to go up, and I think that will tip an awful lot of people over the edge.
There is sort of from talking to people in the industry, you can sense a hesitation from especially UK clients where the economy has started to go down, and we have this war in Europe, of course, mm-hmm. with all its repercussions. So, yeah, I mean, definitely people are starting to think more about what they do with their money, and there's just less of it to.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you come and fish in Iceland prime time, you could now, for the money it costs you to do 3 days in Iceland, you could do 2 weeks in Mexico on the flats. Mm-hmm. You could go to Brazil for a week, including charter flights, 2-3 hour charter flights into the jungle, catching a bunch of fish. You could go to Colombia for a week, and an hour and a half into the jungle, 4-hour boat journey, amazing fishing, and then the reverse home for less than you spend for 3 days fishing here. But the other thing that is nagging people is I don't think that the international market sense that everything is being done that could possibly be done for the Atlantic salmon, but they also don't feel that everything's being done to maintain and reach the highest possible standards of accommodation, food, care, guiding. One of the most common jokes amongst international fishermen is how much time a guide in Iceland spends on his mobile phone instead of guiding. And at £500-600 a day, and we all understand cars are expensive and buying tackle and all the rest of it. And I get that, so I'm sympathetic to that.
I doubt it's a money thing. Of course, it's a lot for the angler, but it's not like the guide is making a huge amount of money. But it's
precise. It seems a lot of money comparatively, and I spend a lot of time actually explaining, look, this is why it costs a lot. Iceland's expensive, salaries are expensive, cars, these great big cars with massive wheel, they take a lot of maintenance. But when you're getting someone sitting on the phone for your £600 a day, then it's a problem.
Yeah. Of course. And I think if you look at also when you come here in '89, there's a lot of these lodges that had sort of recently been built. The Víðidalsá, the Þverá, the Kjarr lodges and all that. And they were sort of up to that standard. Yeah. And then we've had the world become a lot smaller, and the lodges somewhere you see, even in Argentina and some of these flats fishing places have just kind of taken on a whole different scale of service.
Yeah.
So we are definitely lacking there.
Yeah.
But would you say, because obviously if investing in that sort of infrastructure will also drive up the prices. So if something like a lodge and the roads and everything would be put into place, that would obviously be paid by the anglers. Would you say there is room for it to be more expensive, having it more luxury, or?
I mean, there's a fundamental problem, which is the number of fish is going down and the price is going up, and that's a real problem. And I've come to Iceland for many years. I've talked to a lot of people, but I'm not Icelandic and I don't live here, and therefore I don't have a detailed understanding of the politics of the relationship between the farmers that own the rivers and the leaseholders, etc. But something's got to give, because otherwise it's ultimately going to be a car crash. And I think it's possible that there will be a mass exodus, because at some point there won't be value for money. And I don't think I don't think that enough is being done for the Atlantic salmon. I think, I think it's just utter madness to have allowed salmon farms to Iceland. I don't know, nobody's shown me the absolute economics of all the various rivers and who they employ and what it generates versus a salmon farm. But I can't believe that a few salmon farms employ and generate more jobs, income, etc., than the salmon fly fishing industry in Iceland. I just can't believe that that's the case. So, the government has a role to play in allowing it to happen. It astonishes me that any river in Iceland is allowing the killing of fish. Mm-hmm. And you in your generation, I remember it's actually a topical comment, as the centre of this story is an Icelander, Orri. I remember when Orri came to London in 1992.
That's Orri Vigfússon.
Yeah. I think I was 25 or 27, whatever it was. Anyhow, there was this big meeting at Fishmongers Hall where Orri assembled the great and the good of UK salmon fishing and explained his concept, North Atlantic Salmon Fund, and the fact that the UK needed to contribute whatever it was, £250,000 or whatever the amount was, to buying out the nets. And this was, everybody applauded the concept. But I've never seen a bunch of people. I don't know how I was there, but I was there and I was very junior and therefore I didn't really contribute to the meeting. But all these people who ran the AST and all the various salmon conservation organizations were around that table, all scratching their chins, going, and nobody came up with any answers. There was no "we'll do this" or we can do. There was no can-do attitude, and looking back on it, looking back on those people around that table, they didn't do a great job for Orri. They definitely didn't contest salmon farms in the UK proactively enough. In Scotland, they basically let down the Atlantic salmon in Scotland. They weren't fighting hard enough. Mm. And now I'm the age that they all were. I feel a sense of responsibility in the things that I am involved with, not particularly fishing, but some of it, to not be sitting on my hands, not being inactive. And you're a young person, and I feel that the young of Iceland, who have probably, I'm guessing, lost their salmon fishing, either because it's beyond their reach in terms of financial, or because it's not as good as it was, or because it's all sewn up with corporate or rich foreigners or whatever. I think you're being let down by the people who are meant to be looking after the Atlantic salmon. I mean, Atlantic salmon in Iceland, Atlantic salmon fishing in Iceland is, there's no more famous place. Mm-hmm. And it's slowly, I've watched it over 30 years, it's going. And you are potentially being let down. And for any river to be killing wild Atlantic salmon in 2023, in my opinion, for your generation, should be outrageously unacceptable. It is robbing you of your future of salmon fishing. Mm. It's just not acceptable, in my opinion. And the Icelandic Wildlife Fund, who have done a lot of great work and raised money, and I've helped them raise money, etc. They should be out there banging on the table, making sure that the killing of fish ceases.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if it's lots of grills come in, etc. It's just too valuable to be going, oh, well, you know, this corporate group won't come unless we let them kill some fish. In the greater scheme of it, I mean, it's just madness. It's complete madness.
The salmon is a national treasure, the way I
Exactly.
look at it, and we have just a responsibility as a civilized nation to take care of it.
Exactly.
Whether it be to sell the next corporate group or not, it's irrelevant in the grand scheme.
Exactly. And those corporate groups, you know, someone, and I presume it should be the Icelandic Wildlife Fund, someone needs to be educating these corporate groups that they need to wake up and realize that they're just completely out of touch with reality if they think they can go to these rivers and kill fish. And young people should be out on the streets, frankly. It's ridiculous the way it's being. And the same with, you know, killing trout to save the salmon. The salmon and trout in this country have lived
10,000
happily
years
for millennia.
Yeah.
So the concept that if you kill a few stunning wild trout, it's going to save your salmon is ridiculous.
I can tell you a beautiful trout has saved many of salmon fishing day with no fish from my clients, for example.
That too. And, you know, if the salmon's gone, and the salmon may go, even if you do release everything and look after your rivers and do all the things that are necessary, global warming may kill off the salmon, and Iceland will only be left with this brown trout. So again, it seems crazy to me to be whacking them on the head just to try and save the salmon.
And even not, let's say that comes to that conclusion, global warming out of sort of our small reach kills off the Atlantic salmon. At least we can go down and say we did everything we could.
Exactly.
Can we say that today?
No.
No.
And too often I hear that, oh, you know, we'd like to release them, but we've got to let this group kill a few fish. It's just, those days are over. And you've only got to look at Scotland. I think the average day rod effort to catch a fish in Scotland is something like 31 days. So you've got to go salmon fishing for 31 days on average to catch a salmon in Scotland.
You're not going to get new people to commit to that.
Exactly. You're just not. And therefore, you erode your interest, and then when the salmon really needs people, nobody's interested, because why would they be interested? They've never caught one, they've never been hit, they've never held one, they've never been on a salmon river, they don't know what anybody's talking about. So why would they be interested in salmon conservation? And that has happened in the UK, and it will happen in Iceland.
And there will be sort of a generational rift, where it's people your age that are trying to speak to people Birkir's age here, and Birkir's age group has no connection to the salmon. They might never have seen one.
So you're 35?
I'm 35.
Biggie, you're 28. So how many days salmon fishing of your own account, not guiding, not invitations, did you do between the two of you last year, as an example?
Without invitation, zero. Not a single day.
It's an acquire there, 0.
Yeah.
I'm doing 3 days this year. That's a novelty.
Where are you going?
Hafralónsá.
Cool. Same here, 3 days, Víðidalsá.
Víðidalsá, cool.
Yeah, that's it.
But I mean, that's very much, I consider that a luxury. And I also got into it young. I was lucky, I was guiding, so I'm bitten by the bug, so I'm willing to maybe spend money I don't necessarily have to go feed that addiction. But to start today, I think we connect very well to the grassroots of the sport here in Iceland through our podcast, and I feel the young anglers today, they are asking about fluorocarbon liters for trout and 14 hooks, and they're not thinking Collie Dog or Francis for salmon. They're just, it's not even, it used to be you started as a kid in trout and then you graduated to salmon as an adult. That's no longer, that chain is broken.
Yeah, and it's...
And you're not going to get these people to care.
Yeah, you're not going to get them. I mean, and yet for me, it's the most interesting salmon fishing in the world because of the beauty of the rivers, the clarity of the water, the way the fish in Iceland react. I mean, it's just fantastic. But it's a crime that there's a generation in Iceland, which is, I didn't realize you were as old as 35, aren't even managing to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think something's got to get. I don't know enough how to solve the problem, but if it carries on the way it seems to be, there's going to be a big problem.
And I can only assume with your statistics about catching fish in Scotland, you must be seeing your clients get older, not having the legs anymore to go fishing. And,
absolutely.
And their kids are going paragliding in Mexico instead of going salmon fishing.
What they're not I mean, what they're doing is they look at people of my generation or older, and we go fishing, and we spend, whatever we spend, £6,000-7,000 going for 3 days in Iceland, or double that. Some people come for a week, and you go, oh well, it was a drought this year, I caught one fish, and then they witness them signing up for next year, and they think they're completely crazy. And what they do is, go to Brazil, and instead of 4 of them catching a salmon between them, they go and catch 150 peacock bass, and it's really visual, and you see the takes, and one takes the fly, and then there's 20 around it, and then the other guys can cast, and there's they in a jungle, in an amazing wilderness, they have a proper adventure, and they have change to what their dads are spending in Iceland catching nothing.
And I can also assume when you started in the 80s, in a world where you have British Airways, Icelandair, and Pan Am, and Lufthansa,
yeah.
And it's just, you can go to Iceland, you can go to Norway. Which one would you like to do?
Yeah.
And now it's just New Zealand, Argentina, it's Brazil, it's
right.
Seychelles. There's so many more options, and still a limited pool of people that both can afford to travel for fishing and want to.
That's true. And it's not, as I say, my last day on this planet would probably be spent in Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
I love it that much, but it's not what it used to be. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to my clients, they get the whole price rise thing because I can explain it to them. Mm-hmm. But what they don't get is, is everything being done to try and look after these fish? And the answer is no, and that irritates them. Do they feel cared for by the lodges, and people are really focused and sort of hospitality orientated, etc.? No, they don't, and that irritates them. It's one thing, the little cellar lodge that nobody knew the cellar, etc. It was like a secret river that the bed didn't get repaired for 20 years. That's fine, but when it's $6-7 for 3 days in a mainstream lodge, and the attitude to safety, or things don't get repaired, etc., people begin to think that you're just taking the piss.
Mm-hmm. I think sort of my answer to that, to explain it, would be in a way that the leases are probably way too high, and the people receiving those leases are maybe a little bit dependent on that money. So all of it gets paid out as dividends. Nothing gets reinvested, because they have sort of grown accustomed to the next guy coming with, let's call it just what it is, fuck you money, just paying whatever they need to. And every year they get more. People are telling them there's troubles, but every year they're getting more. There's less money, because I've seen just a lot of guides that used to go guiding as sort of a way to bump their salary for summer breaks. Yeah. They don't do that anymore because they can't raise the price of the week. So they keep the salaries down.
Right.
And if you want, I went to Argentina, which is, it's not cheap.
No.
But it's cheaper to employ people there. So there is a girl who comes into the waiting room and offers you a drink. Mm-hmm. And there's a guy mowing the lawn, and there's wardens at the break watching the river. And so it's hard to raise the level of service in an environment like Iceland, where you need to pay someone £500-600 a day to work in the logistics.
So you asked me, are we at tipping point?
Mm-hmm.
From a client point of view, I'll ask you the same question. At what point do the leaseholders, at what point is it just, I mean, you know, these leaseholders, the concept of inviting the press for a week's fishing or 3 days fishing doesn't exist in Iceland. And the reason that it doesn't exist is because every single day has to be let in order to make the books balance. Mm-hmm. At what point do the leaseholders go, you know what, I just don't, I mean, it used to be such a status symbol in Iceland, if I'm correct, to be a leaseholder. It was a big deal for people in the fishing world to be a leaseholder. How close are we to a situation where the leaseholders are going, you know what, I'm done with this. This is just too much stress. It's not enough money. I'm trying to keep, you know, I bring some of the most wealthy, influential people in the world to Iceland. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I admit I can be a bit of a pain in the ass on their behalf.
For sure. I think they expect that for the price they're paying.
And therefore, I'm pressing these leaseholder guys to get their standards right and deliver a product, et cetera, et cetera. At what point is it just not worth it to them?
I think we have kind of, in a way, reached that point. I mean, we've seen people go out of the industry. We've seen rivers go up for lease, and they've been getting an increase in the lease. But some of the biggest players, I mean, they're not many. They're Regnasi, Starir, Reykjavík Angling Club. Used to be Árni Baldursson, and of course Radcliffe in the east, but it's a little bit of a different situation maybe. They're not making bids, but you have somebody who has a lot of money and has interest in fishing that still raises the leash.
Right.
So I think we are getting, without criticizing those people that are interested in fishing, but it is becoming, I mean, yeah, it is. There is a lot of that. I think some of the leaseholders that need to pay salary, overhead, want to bring clients at prices they can sell and actually make a little bit of a margin. Mm-hmm. They are not able to bid for the rivers because people are willing to bid for rivers and not make any margin because it's just a status symbol.
Yeah.
Or just even to get access.
So is the next step that the leaseholders fall away and the people who own the river then hire somebody to run the river and it's sold directly? Is that where we're headed?
We are seeing that. We're both seeing it with Norðurá and with Rangá in some perspective and other rivers where it's just you make a deal. Let's say you lease a river and you pick your days for you and your family and your friends, and then somebody, okay, these are the days, sell it at a 15 to 20% commission. Right. Which also in a way makes more sense because if a river is $1 million a year and you need to bankroll that and if everything goes right you make 10%, you could just do a lot more sensible things with $1 million. You could, I mean, you could just, that's not a good investment.
And the other issue is these short leases are a complete disincentive for those leaseholders to make any investments in looking after the river. I mean,
they are very incented to sell everything today, maximize tomorrow, and we are seeing smolts back on the rivers and stuff.
So they're not incentivized to look after that river or invest in that river But is it just law in Iceland that it's a 3-year cycle, or can people decide the cycle?
They can decide the cycle, but it is a maximum of 10 years.
Right.
And we are thankfully seeing more of long contracts. I think the Grímsá contract now is 7 or 10 years, and we're 7. Stóra Laxá is 10 years, and luckily we are seeing that where people are willing to sort of build towards something, but how far it goes, I mean, I feel there's a great pressure on those leaseholders because there's always the next guy knocking on the door with a suitcase of cash just to take over.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Víðidalsá went up for auction, of course, a great river, but it's been in a slump, let's just be honest. I don't think we're offending anyone with that.
Yeah.
And we see a great increase and potentially a 9th rod being added, which we know kind of throws off the balance of the rotation and everything.
Yeah.
Just to make the books. And I don't know, I think all of this pressure of maximizing yield from the river financially today is definitely not serving the salmon.
No, not at all.
And I asked a friend of mine who's a leaseholder, he asked one of the biologists who was sort of monitoring his river, doing a small par count, what do you think is the biggest threat to Icelandic salmon? And he said the landowners. Because let's just say, also in a season we had like 2019, where we had horrible runs coupled with horrible droughts.
Yeah.
We have no mechanism of closing the rivers or stopping the fishing. We always have to deliver the fish, and even having quotas in such a year means there is no quota, because everything you catch is within the quota.
Exactly.
So it hits double on a bad year, the quota system. If even the farmers were sort of, let's say it gets put into law, if you need to put 10% of the rent towards a rainy day fund, which you can maybe even pay out in an emergency situation, which we had like in 2019. And you can, I've had silly conversations where a washing machine breaks in the fishing lots, and you ask the river owners who make $500,000 a year from the river to buy a new washing machine, and they ask the leaseholder to upfront it. It's £1,000 because they paid all of the $500,000 out as dividends right away.
Crazy.
Who would run a business like that?
Yeah.
Nobody.
But the basic laws of economics is you can't charge more and deliver less. It's going to be a car crash, and that's where we're headed. And there are lots of reasons for it. Someone's got to work out the solutions, because you can't just charge more and more money, have less and less fish, less and less standards. You've got, in my opinion, you've got less experienced guides. You've just said a lot of guides are beginning to leave, which I would concur with. So, you've got people who are spending, depending on the currency, plus minus £7,000 for 3 days fishing, let's say on Vida d'Alsa or any river, and they're introduced to their guide, and they find out that their guide has never guided on that river before. Is that value for money?
No.
And one of the reasons he doesn't know the river is because every single day on that river has to be let. You can't even let him fish the river to learn it, because you can't afford to.
No.
So where is it all going to end?
Like I mentioned, I went to Argentina last year. There, a changeover day is a Saturday. The guides are off, so they can actually sleep, for example, because we were talking about tired guides on the phone. They can sleep, and they can actually go and fish the river. Yeah, maybe leave the best pools alone. Yeah. If there's some area you're unfamiliar with, or there's a pool nobody's checked, they can go and check it and do a bit of fishing. Keep
or just
morale
walking
up.
The river on, in the case of Rio Grande, just to walk the river on the high bank side and to be able to look in the river is educational for a guide. You can't do that when there's fishermen there.
No. So. I remember because some things are sort of, I think, turned more positive in the way we're not doing so many 6:30 wake-ups, and we're not fishing all the hours and trying to catch as many fish. It's become more experience-oriented in general. But for years, working 60 days straight, from 6:30 to 11 o'clock, and
it's crazy.
It's inhumane in a way.
Yeah.
But but I would say that's a positive in some aspects, that we are shortening the days and all that. But it's definitely for example, some rivers don't have any guides, and they cannot put them on the river. They are not even allowed to drive because nobody is supposed to see any out.
Right.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
And I got lucky when I came to Sella, just basically to be handed over to you.
Well, we had fun. It was good fun. And that's a difficult river to learn. I mean, the variation of pools and all the rest of it is enormous.
But also, which it's part ownership and leaseholding arrangement allows, it's only fished with 6 rods. So you can, as a guide, even if it's a slow season or it's a slow part of the season, you always have pools which haven't been hammered.
Yeah.
And I think with the less fish coming in, those fish, you know, in most rivers, I'm not going to name any rivers because it's basically all the rivers except those on the far northeast side. If it's anything average or below a season, all the pools get hammered so much. You sometimes are just trying to squeeze water out of a rock to catch one, even during prime time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe we need to develop the project. Maybe the owners need to take a step back with their part of the cake for that to happen. But I doubt it will happen. And what I also feel is, and this is probably me talking too much, Tarquin, in our chat here, is the landowners have become too detached from their product. Because there are no unsold days, you can be a farmer, and outside your kitchen window is this famous salmon river. You have never in your day caught a salmon out of it.
Yeah.
Since you were a kid, it was unavailable. It's always going to be unavailable. And if you get, let's say there's worked into the contract some farmers' days at the end of the season, they are too valuable for you to fish for yourself, so you sell them.
So you sell them. Yeah.
So they have no concept of, they never stay in their own fancy lots.
No.
They don't know, you know, oh, maybe a hot tub would be good. Or maybe, oh, the roads are actually terrible.
Yeah.
Or they see the money come into their account.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do anything. I would just wish for it to stay that way. And I'm not saying these people are greedy or bad. It's just always been like that.
Yeah.
And how is that supposed?
I mean, I do agree with you. It's easy to talk about the landowners. They are the people I've probably talked to least, and therefore understand their position least. And I'm sure they would have plenty to say on this subject.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of the farmers, these are not people who are reaping hugely from the capitalistic system, a sheep farmer. And
yeah.
So they are just very dependent naturally on this income.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, something's got to give because it can't carry on as it is, unless you get lucky and the fish start coming back.
And we are being pessimistic about the Icelandic fish stock here. But if we just look globally, Scotland is 30 days, one fish. Norway is having its problem with fish farms having killed off a lot of rivers.
Big time.
Russia is just off the table for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. So probably still, even though we have our problems, we are probably the one place where you can go and catch Atlantic salmon reliably in the world.
Yep, I would agree.
So that's maybe allowing us to float a little bit further towards inevitable demise.
Possibly. I mean, certainly Russia going. I mean, not everybody who goes to Russia, as I said, they're different animals, and therefore, by far, not everybody who goes to Russia wants to come to Iceland. No. But it's probably helped.
Yeah, I think some of the double-hand rivers, like the Rangás, have seen an influx of people come there.
Yeah.
And probably will continue to see that.
Yeah.
But you're not, someone who's fishing lower Jókanga is not gonna sort of feed its addiction in Laxá and Kjós.
No, they're not. Much as I think they should, because I think it's fantastic.
It's the difference between tennis and ping pong or badminton. It's not. Exactly. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same spot. Yeah. And so let's say Russia maintains to be closed, and we just have a status quo in Iceland. We have 10% inflation. Price goes up by that a year. Scotland still is what it is. It's Scotland. It's
getting worse.
It's getting worse. Iceland being the best place in the world, will we just see people paying to come to Iceland for the next 10 years? Or are we looking at this tipping point where people just say, I'm just going to take up golfing?
I think we're very close to the tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm 30 years into my career, haven't got many years to go, and from the point of view of Icelandic tourism, that's a relief, because it's touch and go whether I will end sooner or Iceland will end sooner, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
it's very sad to sort of, because when I started guiding, I got to see those those last years where it was still thriving. In a way, we were still killing, but there was always enough fish. But looking back, those years were also heavily subsidized by smolt releases,
right,
and all of that. So we were probably hitting that bump way before, and we just plowed through it with releasing more smolts and all of that, not realizing what the real situation was.
And now you know, I don't think you've started to feel the negatives of the salmon farming, because it's in its infancy.
That's coming.
If that hits, I mean, people outside Iceland just cannot believe, you know, they used to hold Iceland in such a high regard for resisting. I mean, they can't believe that Iceland's gone down that route. It's unbelievable that that's what's happened.
But it's hard when you have those very wealthy Norwegian corporations. They only need a few people on their side, and they've sort of positioned themselves politically where they are saving the countryside, they're saving the Westfjords, and they're saving the Eastfjords. And everyone who talks against them is just a rich foreign salmon snob, they feel. That's sort of the pushback we get. I feel we should more put in the front, instead of talking about the salmon fishing, we should talk about the farmers who actually make their livelihood with these rivers. Where are they? Why aren't they screaming in the streets? Because they are hugely dependent on this income.
And it's the same, you know, people want to stop grouse shooting in the UK, but and the main reason they want to do it is because they don't like rich people, and therefore, and it's rich people who do it, and probably richer people than go salmon fishing. But you know, a grouse day could employ, you know, tens of people, if not up to 100 people, when you get, you know, loaders and chefs and beaters and all those sorts of people, and those are the people who form the community, not the people who come and shoot. But they seem to be forgotten, and they will be the ones who suffer. And you know, you go into a grouse community valley in May, which is where we are now, you won't meet too many people who don't know what the weather forecast is, because if it's bad, there won't be any grouse, and that will mean a very tough autumn financially, and people can't afford that in those areas.
And if the rich guy isn't shooting grouse, he's just doing something else.
Yeah, and
he's the least affected.
Goes and plays somewhere else. Exactly, that's right.
I think, I was a little, not completely surprised, but when we spoke on the cello last year, because with Frontiers and the clientele you bring primetime clients that these are the foreigners that nobody ever sees, but here are fishing the rivers. And these are wealthy people, and they are starting to really feel that the prices and the level of service is slumping comparative to the quality of the fishing.
They are, and you know, they I wouldn't classify them as the super rich, but it's almost becoming the super rich.
Yeah.
And it's a real concern for me. I mean, you know, one of the things that shooting in the UK has on its side compared to fishing is it involves more people. It involves cooks, it involves loaders, it involves dog people, it involves gamekeepers, it involves beaters. You know, it involves lots of people. The number of people who support a salmon fishing lodge is a few guides and a chef and some cleaning girls. So the number that would be impacted in the loss of that lodge compared to if it was a shooting lodge is different. But you know, the more all of these sports become for the super rich, the less anyone else is going to give a damn. Mm-hmm. And that is a real problem. It really is a problem.
And it's because people often see this as us, the fishermen, the locals, versus the corporations and the super rich. But for someone, for the super rich, there needs to be salmon. For people to care about the salmon, there needs to be connection to the fishing society locally.
Yeah.
So it all works hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you say, the super rich will just go and play somewhere else if there's no salmon or no grouse or whatever. And it's the little people that ultimately suffer. And as I say, your younger generation, I would be pretty unhappy the way things are, I think.
But could you, maybe if we go back to, you said you would like us to release all fish, caught salmon, stop killing the trouts in the river. Of course, it's a sort of marketed as a whole ecosystem in a way. There's no unwanted native fish here. And then there's the service in the lodges and everything, which is hard to sort of manage with the cost of salary. But is there other things you would like for Iceland to do, or something we can actually manage, other than, of course, the catch and release is something every angler can manage on a personal level?
Well, I don't know your laws about predators. I think the number of predators on the rivers is, to my eye, I don't know if statistically or scientifically it's correct, but to my eye, the number of predators on the rivers has increased. I don't know if you're allowed to deal with that. But that would be something, particularly in a drought year. Mm-hmm. I think the par are very vulnerable in a drought year to predators.
Numbers are supporting that.
Sorry?
Numbers support that.
They do.
We have had, smolts in their migration route are being predated on more easily. And also with global warming, winters being warmer, the fish are accessible in the wintertime.
And what happens when the smolts hit the sea? Are they predated there as well?
Yes, but I was talking to a friend of mine last week, Klaus Frimor.
Yeah, I know Klaus.
In Denmark, and I was talking about some cormorants and mergansers that I was seeing on the rivers this winter. And then he showed me a picture from Denmark, and it was just an endless ocean of cormorants.
Right.
Obviously, we don't have that, and there is a season for cormorants and mergansers.
What, to shoot them?
To shoot them,
right?
Here in Iceland, and it's quite liberal, especially in the wintertime. But again, if you're the owner of this river, you would maybe need to pay someone to do that job.
Yeah.
But doesn't seem to be any room within sort of the amount they get versus the dividends to do that. Because I think I would really plead to river owners, and some of them, keep in mind, are doing it well, are paying for minks to be culled and are have the rifle and the shotgun in the back of their truck when they're driving in the season. But I think a lot more could be very easily done with the predation.
And within the law, that is.
Within the law.
Yeah. Yeah. And are gulls beginning to have an impact?
I'm not sure. But having spoken to the guys from the Rangás that obviously have a lot of experience from releasing large numbers of smolts, they would wait for a dark evening where the river's in spade.
Right.
Because if they just release those silvery smolts on a sunny day, they could just see the gulls come from miles off just to predate.
Yeah. I remember I ran the kiosk for a brief period, and we used to, at Panoy in Russia, we had the largest tagging project of any Atlantic salmon river. We used to tag 1,000, 1,500 fish in the first 3 weeks. So we were busy with the old tagging gun, and we decided to tag in the kiosk. And we had a lot of debate about what color tag to use, because you've got clear water. And I can't remember what we decided on, but whatever it was the wrong color. And what the gulls used to do is track the salmon and spook them until they basically spook themselves onto the rocks, and then the gulls would get them, and they were able to see the salmon because of the tag.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I have once seen a gull catch a salmon that was running up in the Carrow, in the flats there, low water, 10-pound female, back up from the water. I was driving up there, and he basically almost kind of rode on its back and just tired it out until it fell on its side, ate the liver and flew off.
Yeah.
But they are amazing predators, really, if you think about it.
And I mean, we have gull problems in the north of England, taking what we call ground nesting birds, which you have plenty of in this country. And, the reason is there's less food in the sea, and the gulls therefore come inland instead of go to sea for food. And that, it's again, we've damaged the sea, which is having an impact on the land, because the gulls are coming inland, eating the chicks of curlews and stuff. Do you have curlews in this country? Yeah. So they come in and hunt curlew chicks and all the other chicks. Does that go on here, or is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you see a lot of. Obviously, we have the ocean and most of the seagulls are there, but I can only assume, we have some species of seagull that sort of, you can see them flying over the nest, picking off even eggs. And
I mean, you see skewers and stuff, but skewers are designed to do that. That they've always done that. But gulls now come miles and miles inland, partly to eat French fries,
True,
and partly to eat curlew chicks.
French fries. What is it about seagulls and French fries?
And then 2020, when we had lockdown, there weren't any French fries. Then they had to look for curlew chicks even more, because there were no French fries.
That's a sad.
Yeah, but it's reality. So, I think we're all learning that there is a knock-on impact of everything we do that perhaps we hadn't thought about.
And I think, because we've spoken quite a bit about the ownership of the rivers, and what is quite controversial politically in Iceland, and people have sort of strong opinions about this, Radcliffe's ownership in the northeast, but his sort of lack of dependency on the revenues has allowed for him to finance some actual research and sort of excavate, sort of trying to understand what is going on. And one of the things they sort of researched was when smolts are leaving the Vesturdalsá, they would pit tag them, and then they would cross a barrier, and then they would have another barrier lower in the system. And the amount of smolts that were lost in those 2 kilometers was staggering. What was it, Birgir? 50-60% or something.
And how are they being lost?
So now they're trying to replicate the results of this. They've replicated it once, so they've done it twice, and now they are trying to understand what happens. But it's just 2 kilometers where a par is gone silvery. They stick to the uppermost layer of the water, and they disappear.
And is this in the river or in the estuary?
In the river.
In the river.
What happens? Mergansers, gulls, mink.
That's what they think it is?
They think it's definitely that, because these are healthy fish that have lived in the river for 4 years. Man, it's too small.
Yeah.
And then they lose such a huge percentage in just their final journey to the ocean.
I mean, there's some really good work being done in Scotland by the AST, the modern AST, who are doing great work. And I think they thought a lot of the problems were in the sea. And I think they're beginning to realize that at least 50% of the problem is in the river. So,
and also just some very basic stuff that I hadn't thought about, which is coming out from some of the research in the northeast here, is what do salmon parr eat and what do they prefer to eat? Because that's not necessarily the same thing.
Absolutely.
And
shifting baseline syndrome.
Yeah. And it turns out they prefer to eat something like earthworms or caddises, but 90-something% of what they are eating is black midges.
Right.
And being so dependent on a one food source means global warming, some unforeseeable change in nature,
wipes out
which
the
would
black
disrupt that, then the salmon have lost 90% of their food.
And they're planting all those trees to create leaf litter, to create insects.
Slow down the wind, which makes life better for insects and all that.
I think that's brilliant.
That is some real big picture. Spending money today to make the product more valuable in 10, 20 years.
And they're sharing their information liberally with Iceland. So they are contributing to the conversation.
So there might be all sorts of feelings about Mr. Radcliffe, but I think this is the fact that he's the only one doing it with his own money. I'm just happy somebody's doing it.
Exactly.
Because then the others are sitting on their ass. Maybe we'll leech off this. But it requires something to plant a tree. It might not take effect even in his own lifetime.
Exactly.
Keep that in mind.
That's right.
So it's not like painting a house.
And it has, I mean, that's so interesting, working out what the bar... Again, you have application to the grouse world. Just little things that you don't think about, like they give them medicated grit because they get this worm which does a lot of damage, and you talk to some keepers, and the really good ones, a particular friend of mine, he's opening the crop of a grouse, tipping out the grit and examining the grit. The way he explained it to me, he said, if I put a plate of biscuits in front of you, you're going to take the one you like. And if there's another one, you might take another one of the ones you like. And he said, a grouse will be the same. So if we want the grouse to take the grit, we need to work out what biscuit they like. And that's what we need to give them, because they'll take it more willingly. And then another thing he talked to me about was they put the grit in trays on the moor, spread all over the moor. And he was consulting for a moor on why they were not as successful as they were. And he rang me. He said, I think I've spotted a problem already. I'm just driving up the track. And he said, I think the grit trays are too deep. He said, I think they're a centimetre too deep. And I'm like, okay. He said, look, if you're creeping up on a bird, you watch, the bird's not looking, you creep up on it, it's not looking. He said, what we're doing is asking a grouse to stick its head in that tray for a fraction longer because it's deeper, and therefore we're asking it to risk not being predator aware for a fraction longer than it's comfortable with, and therefore it's not going to take that risk, and therefore it's not going to take the grit. And then he rings me about 2-3 months later and goes, he said, I've worked out that the 8 most unreliable moors in whatever area, I can't remember what he said. He said, they all have the same grit tray.
That's amazing.
And that sounds to me like the kind of detail that Ratcliffe's going into. And I mean, you remember the era of the British cycling team was... We had world domination in the sort of 2012 Olympics, and there was the guy who was in charge of it all was a guy called Dave Brailsford, and he would say, if we can improve by 0.1%, that gives us an advantage over everybody else. So they're looking for that margin of improvement. And that's what Ratcliffe and some, those are the details. So you need people like that.
Definitely. I mean, I think in my whole lifetime, and I think I can probably say for you and yours as well, there's been too much, we simply don't know. The salmon is a mystery. It's a mysterious creature.
Yeah. Or guessing.
Or guessing, probably way too much guessing.
and sometimes horribly wrong guesses.
Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
So yeah.
So maybe I feel we've talked a bit too negatively, but of course we are talking about something we are very passionate about, which is the rivers in Iceland.
And we love it, and we don't want to see it go away. No. And therefore we're concerned about it.
We don't want to be the last generation of people to fish for Atlantic salmon. Can I ask you to end with, because something very interesting, I think, to all salmon anglers and fishermen is the Alta.
Yeah.
And I know you've had a long-standing relationship with that river. Mm-hmm. How did you end up there? And what's this like, this famous...
Oh, dear. I was very, very lucky. I first went to Alta when I was 26, which is very young.
Yeah.
And I was invited by a friend of mine, and he happened to... It was a weird year. We had a great time, and I remember on my first night on Alta, and I went to the first pool, and it's just enormous. An Alta fish taking the fly is, I don't know if you've ever seen tuna feeding.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. So this sort of great big tuna came up and nailed my fly and just pulled and came off. I was like, I can't believe that's happened. And then we went to the next pool, fishing away, because my friend wasn't out because he was getting a divorce at the time. There was a lot of stress in his life, so he sent me out. And it was a short pool, and this sort of 12-kilo fish just flew into the air, and I could see my fly hanging out of its mouth. I was like, okay, well, this is... so I'm just waiting for the pull. No pull. It must have splashed back in the water, and the fly must have fallen out of its mouth. I was like, your first night on Alta is a big night, believe me. And then the next pool we go, and I get a big crashing tuna take, and it's fantastic, and the reels, and the lines sort of disappearing into the distance. I'm leaning into it, and I'm talking to the boatman, who one of them is still my boatman today. He's like my brother, and I see this fish, big fish, jump in the rapids at the top of the pool, 50 yards above us, and my line is going all the way down the pool. I was like, look, guys, there's another one. And they're like, that's your fish. And there's this sort of 200-meter bend. Anyhow, that was a 16-kilo, 35-pound fish. Which was my first Alta fish. Mint silver, fantastic.
First fish, 16 kilo.
And it won't surprise you that Alta has its complications in terms of the way it's run. But basically it's run, all the landowners form an association and they appoint a board, and the board leases certain weeks to certain people, and has done since 17, whatever it is, coming up for the 300-year anniversary. And my friend had 4 weeks that he leased from them. And in days of old, they had previously done this, and then the guy who had the lease kind of failed to come up with the money, and that left the board with egg on their face in terms of paying their dividends to their 200 land association members, etc. So he was nervous that they were going to tell him that they didn't want to carry on with him. So we came up with this scheme of creating these syndicates, and I went back to London and wrote some rules with a lawyer, and he formed these various syndicates. And as a thank you, he gave me a membership of probably the most prestigious salmon fishing week that exists to this day. And so I fished it ever since. So 30 whatever years.
I mean, we have these fantastic salmon, of course, here in Iceland, both the grills and then the salmon. And then you see something like a Norwegian Alta fish, fresh. It's like the difference between a chicken and an ostrich or something.
I mean,
they are almost unreal.
What's amazing about Alta is it has an extraordinary history. And we could do a whole another
interview about
podcast about. I could tell you Alta stories.
I've seen your carved fish. There's a lot of
all
stories.
That sort of stuff. I mean, we should do it sometime, but it's got so much history and so many stories and crazy things like playing fish for 5 hours. And the Norwegians, when they get their time to fish on the river, and Iceland could do well to actually learn from that, because they do let it to foreigners, but the local people get an opportunity to fish, and therefore they're invested in the river, et cetera, et cetera. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to look at that model.
Through like a lottery system?
Yeah, through a lottery system. But when they get to fish, they get 2 days on certain pools, and the day is 18 hours, et cetera. So stories of people paying 5 hours, paying a fish for 5 hours, and it's like, and then what happened? And well, they cut the line because they were using up their 18 hours fishing.
They wanted something for the smoker.
so they just cut the line. It's like, oh my God. And then there's another wonderful story of they hook this fish and they're playing it, and it's just sort of moving around, but not very much, and it goes on for hours and hours and hours, and then it doesn't really move, it just sways in the current. So they got a coffee cup, and they tied a bit of nylon through the handle of the coffee cup and round the line, and let go of the coffee cup so it would travel down the line and bonk the fish on the head, and to try and make it move. Well, it worked. The problem was the salmon didn't stop moving and cleaned the reel and broke the line.
That's a great story.
So, but there are so many stories. But what is fantastic about it is it's beautiful fly water. There's one pool that's deep. The rest of them are just classical, beautiful fly water. And they've got their problems. They're still killing too many fish.
Yeah, you see these fish hanging by the tail from a tree.
It's crazy. I was the first person to ever release a salmon on Alta, and came in for a lot of criticism, and people thought I was crazy. But in 1992 we had a huge year. We were 10 rods. We caught 190 fish, averaging 26 pounds, and it's like, what are you going to do with 190 corpses
huge
of averaging
tunas.
26? It's like, what? So we caught, I don't know, 13, 14 fish in 3 days, and it's just like, this is madness. And your Alta standard fish is 11 kilo female fish, 24-pound fish.
Fish of a lifetime in Iceland.
And it's just madness to just bonk all of those fish on the head. That's crazy. So we just stopped. We stopped there and then. And but it's a fabulous river with beautiful fly water. It's very well, for us, it's very well run. It's very well done. And I'm privileged to be able to go there. And my boatmen, they're not guides like Icelandic guides. Icelandic guides, good Icelandic guides, are very skillful, very knowledgeable, very intense. It's a very intense relationship when you're guiding someone. You're changing flies all the time. The boatmen are there to take you to where they think the fish are and get you in the right angle. But where the boatmen really kick in is when you're traveling down the river with a big fish. My first 40-pound fish, we followed it for 2.5 miles or 2.5 kilometers down major sets of rapids. You're sitting in these canoes looking up at the waves. And that's when the boatmen become gods, because they are controlling that boat and keeping people safe.
It's really the two of you fighting that fish.
Yeah. And you become a team, you become like brothers. And without them and their skill level in maneuvering that boat when you've got fish on, going backwards down rapids and stuff. I remember we hooked a fish which was, we thought it was 40 pounds, and then we decided to actually go back to the lodge and get scales, and it was like 39.5 pounds, so we didn't go down as a 40 pounder, but beautiful fish. And we got in this sort of, we caught it just above rapids, and there was this big rock, and so the rapids would go left or go right, and we had this fish, and it was sitting in front of the rock, and we couldn't get it up because there were rocks in the way there, and I got it all on video actually, and then we have this long conversation about, do we take it up, do we take it down? If we take it down, and then I go, well guys, if we take it down, which side would you go? And they're like, and then there's this sort of chat in Norwegian between the boatmen, and then they go, we don't know because we've never done it before.
That's not the thing you want to hear.
So we decided to go down the right-hand side. So we back the canoe down the right-hand side, and the fish comes down, and it's on video. And we sort of tumble down, and I fall in the boat on my knees because we sort of get unbalanced. And the guys are shouting at you, down, 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 where's the fish? And the fish is here, and then the fish goes down, and then they go, down, down, down in Norwegian, and then it's like up, 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 because the fish has gone, we've gone down, and the fish went up, and I mean, it's just epic.
Yeah.
Every fish, understandably, is celebrated with whiskey and time to sort of relax and take it all in, and because most fish are a proper
go 12 rounds
battle. And the whiskey's very important. We always pour whiskey in the river at the beginning of the night, and we always pour whiskey in the river when we catch a fish, and everybody always has a whiskey. And I remember one year we caught a fish, and then we caught another fish, and we landed the second fish in a particularly difficult place up against a cliff. It was all very complicated, and because of where we landed it, we didn't have whiskey. But we kind of forgot about that. We just forgot the whiskey and went on fishing, and we're fishing away and nothing's happening. It's like, God, the night got off to such a good start. What's gone wrong? And then one of the boys goes, I know what went wrong. We forgot to have whiskey. So the guys stopped. We were in the middle of the river fishing a pool. The guys stop paddling. They get the whiskey bottle. They pour it in the wooden cup. They put water in it. They pass it to Bjorn, and then they pass it to Peter and me, and then I pass it to Per, and everybody has a sip. And then they start rowing again, and I pick the rod up, cast, first cast.
Written in the stars.
Unbelievable.
One last question,
Yeah.
Tarquin, quickly. I kind of feel I can't let you go without asking this, because as we've talked about, it's hard to become a good salmon angler today with it being so expensive, less fish around. I noticed when you were fishing the Selá last year, you have a small fly box in your waders. You have a limited number of flies you trust, and you change them out very frequently to the onlooker, not in any particular order. So for the anglers who are a little nugget for people to get better at angling salmon fishing, what's your thought process? You have the Madeline, you have the Francis, you have sort of not many flies. It's not a lot of flies in there.
No, there's not a lot of flies.
What's your thinking?
Well, I mean, I have the benefit of 30 years? It must be 30 years on Selá.
You
so
have
I
your
know
confidence
it well.
flies.
And I do have confidence in those flies, and but God, in that particular instance, what you're describing is because of my knowledge of Selá, and in that particular instance, I had guided the week before, so I was completely zoned in. I often start rather slowly on rivers, but once I get zoned, I know what I'm doing. So the explanation for the few amount of flies is because I know the river and I know what's going on, and I'd been there a week already, etc. What is my advice to a salmon angler? I think my best advice for a salmon angler is try and remember when you do catch a fish. Try and remember exactly what happened. what were you doing with your left hand if you're right-handed? Because particularly in Iceland, I think your left hand catches more fish than your right hand. You know, the stripping and how you're stripping and how you're moving the fly, and if you've got the rod tucked under and all that sort of stuff. Because you've got to build your database of knowledge. And it doesn't matter if it's an Iceland river, a Norwegian river, a Russian river, whatever. If you're not taking in what's going on, you're never going to learn to be a good fisherman.
Very true.
But if you are taking in what's going on, you can draw from any amount of experience and apply it to what's in front of you.
I don't think we talked about this, but watching you with your left hand, you do a figure eight. The conclusion I came to, and we didn't talk about this actually, I think, on the cello, is you try to keep the fly very often at an even pace. So if it starts off on the far side where the current's fast, you're slow on the left hand, even dead, then it flows into the slower, you pick it up, and as it comes completely on the dangle, you're going faster.
I try and make the fly be interesting. I view salmon like a cat. You know, if you've got a cat and you start dangling something in front of that cat, it's gonna go like that. And so, you know, if you're fishing in fast water, if you just let that fly drift around in the fast water, you may catch fish. Fresh salmon can be very easy to catch, but you need that. In my opinion, you need that fly to do something. Mm-hmm. It's got to do something other than what the water's already doing, or what the water would otherwise do, to make it look alive, to make it look interesting. Mm-hmm. And so I try and make the fly do something other than what the water would do to it. Does that make sense?
That's a great tip. That's a great tip.
I don't know. But
well, we're not going to keep you any longer. We can hear the guys putting on their waders here, going to fish for Ice Age brownies here.
Well, it's been great chatting. I've enjoyed it. And if you want to do another one on other fishing stories sometime, we can do that too.
Great. We'll take you up on that.
Okay.
Thank you for the chat, Tarquin.
Pleasure.